Death is both a terrifying and fascinating prospect, so maybe it's no surprise that so many musicians have written songs about it. Some artists, however, have gone one step further and actually inadvertently predicted their own passing. These are the musicians who foresaw their deaths. The 1977 Lynyrd Skynyrd album Street Survivors was released just 3 days before the horrible plane crash that killed 3 members of the band, as well as a crew member. And what's especially awful about the story is that the band wasn't exactly blindsided by the accident, because just 2 days before the crash, they'd all seen 10-foot flames shooting out of the right engine of their Convair. As a result, they were intending to trade in their plane for a Learjet after using it for one final trip. During that flight, however, the Convair fell out of the sky into a Mississippi swamp. In total, 6 people were killed. So, how did the album connect to the tragedy? Well, for a start, the cover featured a photo of the band engulfed in flames. Beyond that, however, a number of lyrics made explicit reference to death, mortality, and the angel of darkness. Not that it's particularly strange for rock stars to sing about death, but the timing of this particular album and its prophetic lyrics were nonetheless deeply unfortunate. In April 2016, the idea that Prince predicted his own death was all over the internet, which certainly made for some sensational headlines at the time.
One song in particular is now generating new interest. Here's the question: did he predict his own death in lyrics he wrote decades earlier?
But did he really see it coming? Well, maybe, if you think that acknowledging your own mortality is kind of a prophecy. Many fans pointed to the fact that the purple-clad superstar sang about wishing life was never ending and things never lasting on Sometimes It Snows in April from the 1986 album Parade. Other fans, meanwhile, highlighted the song Let's Go Crazy, in which Prince sings about elevators, just like how he was later found unresponsive in Yes, an Elevator. Spine-tingling or eye-rolling? You decide. There is at least one final piece of evidence that points to a genuine prediction by Prince. 3 years before he died from an overdose of fentanyl, Prince's sister Tyka Nelson says he called her and said, "I think I've done everything I've come to do." So yeah, maybe oblique references to elevators and by the numbers lyrics about death may not be much, but there is at least that. Jim Morrison was obsessed with death, so it might not come as a shock to find that he predicted his own demise. Frankly, the dude was so preoccupied with mortality that he probably predicted his own demise most nights of the week. And the only reason anyone even remembers this particular occasion was because he happened to get it right. Morrison wasn't exactly a specimen of good health either. Like many of his fellow rock superstars, he liked to live hard and was usually drunk or high on some substance or another. Now, when you're a hardcore drug user, you probably kind of know that you're going to end up killing yourself eventually. So it's not really that freaky to turn around and point out that you're going to die soon. But credit to him, Morrison's prediction was pretty specific. Shortly after the deaths of Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, both musicians who died at the age of 27, Morrison, who was also 27, told a friend, "You're drinking with number 3. Not long after that, Morrison died unexpectedly in the bathtub of a Parisian apartment. His official cause of death was heart failure, but it seems more likely that he died from an overdose. Toward the end of her life, Debbie Reynolds was probably better known for being Carrie Fisher's mother than she was for her music. But early in her career, she had been a singer, most famously starring opposite Gene Kelly in the 1952 musical Singin' in the Rain. Reynolds had featured in a number of different musicals, as well as a good few Broadway productions, before going on to do a handful of more mainstream films. Along the way, she also became a parent, and her daughter became an even bigger star than her mother ever was. Reynolds was known to refer to Carrie Fisher's history of substance abuse as her demons, and often worried about losing her daughter. In the 2013 autobiography Unsinkable, Reynolds wrote, "It's not natural to outlive your child. This has always been my greatest fear. I don't know if I could survive that."
I share everything with my dog.
That's right.
Especially the chip.
Just 3 years later, Fisher went into cardiac arrest while on a flight from London to Los Angeles and died at the age of 60. A day after her daughter's death, Reynolds was at her son's home planning the funeral when she suffered a stroke. She died at the hospital later that day, but not before telling her son, "I miss her so much. I want to be with Carrie." Her son later told ABC News that Reynolds had died from heartache. Whitney Houston's health wasn't exactly in decline when she died. In fact, she was reportedly doing handstands beside the hotel pool just days before her death. But she did have a long history of drug abuse and had been on a particularly hard party streak at the time. So it's no huge shock to find that she might have known something bad was coming.
If you had to name the devil for you, the biggest devil among them?
that would be me.
Houston was in Los Angeles for a pre-Grammy Awards party and brought along some of her usual vices, but things quickly went wrong. On the afternoon of February 11, 2012, she was discovered dead in a hotel bathtub. The coroner ruled her death an accidental drowning, with contributing factors of cocaine use and heart disease. Houston was only 48, and her death was entirely unexpected, except maybe to Houston herself. According to TMZ, she had recently told friends that she thought the end was near, and had even said, "I'm gonna go see Jesus. I wanna see Jesus." Houston got her start as a gospel singer, so it wasn't unusual for her to talk about religion, but her friends said she had become a lot more spiritual during her final days. And there was no evidence that her death was anything other than an accident, so it does seem possible that she saw something coming that no one else could see. Just about everyone has had a death dream that seemed terrifyingly real, but for most of us, nothing ever comes of it. Buddy Holly had a dream about death that turned out to be prophetic in a terrifyingly specific way. And if that isn't quite enough, his wife Maria Elena also had a similar dream on the exact same night. In Maria Elena's dream, she was standing in a field and people were running past her. She looked up and saw a fireball falling from the sky, and then she heard a crash and an explosion. When she woke Holly to tell him about the dream, he said he'd also had a nightmare. In his dream, he was in an airplane with Maria Elena and his brother, but for some reason, he decided to leave Maria Elena behind, dropping her off on the top of a building. The thought that he would leave his wife behind upset him so much that as he described the dream to her, he burst into tears. Then, on February 3, 1959, Buddy Holly got in an airplane, leaving his wife behind. Shortly after midnight, the plane crashed into a field, killing all 4 people on board. His wife Maria later told the Avalanche Journal, "It was the only time I wasn't with him, and I blame myself because I know that if only I had gone along, Buddy never would have gotten into that airplane." Even when young stars are known substance abusers and seem to be careening toward certain doom, it's still shocking when they die young. Juice WRLD died 6 days after his 21st birthday, after suffering a seizure brought on by an overdose of oxycodone and codeine. And what's especially gut-wrenching is that he not only seemed to see it coming, he even wrote about it too. More specifically, the single Legends, from the album of the same name, makes an overt reference to the 27 Club, with Juice claiming that he wouldn't even make it past 21. It gets even weirder than that though. In the same song, Juice laments the passing of XXXTentacion, who had died at the age of 20. The lyrics suggest that the rapper doesn't want to be known as a legend because they all seem to be dying out. Then, just before his death, he tweeted, "This life is yours. Do what TF you want. Do great things and change the world, and don't let no one tell you and you'll be bigger than Juice WRLD will ever be, and he's going down as a legend." Only a few days after declaring himself a legend, Juice WRLD was dead. That's not what you'd call a happy coincidence. In David Bowie's final video, he floats above the sheets of a hospital bed and backs into a wardrobe that looks an awful lot like a coffin. You might say this was Bowie predicting his own death, but that's not quite right. In fact, Bowie had a terminal diagnosis at the time and was well aware that he was dying when he was writing his final album, Black Star. But Bowie had known for years just how old he would be when he died. In the late 1970s, a psychic told him he would live to be 69 or 70. And Bowie didn't just laugh off the news. He actually put a plan into action. Mike Garson, who played piano for Bowie on 9 of his albums, later said the psychic Bowie consulted with was, quote, real, and that David knew it and he didn't doubt it for a second. He told me about it with certainty, accepted it, and planned for his future based on that. As it turned out, the age of death prediction turned out to be eerily accurate, and Bowie was right to pay attention. The iconic singer was diagnosed with liver cancer in 2014 and died from the disease just 18 months later at the age of 69. Despite the fact that Patsy Cline's career only lasted about 5 years, she has come to be recognized as one of the most iconic country music singers of all time, and she could have easily continued singing for decades. In fact, everyone thought Patsy had a long career ahead of her. Everyone except Patsy herself, that is. According to her friends, Cline herself always had a strange sense that she was going to die soon. And once, during a commercial flight to Kansas City, she was suddenly so overcome with a desire to write out her will that she scrawled it onto a piece of stationery. Then, in 1963, she reportedly told fellow singer Ray Walker that, after surviving 2 car accidents, she expected a third one to kill her. A week after telling him that, she died in a plane crash. Cline was 30 years old. Weezer's former bassist Mikey Welsh posted some scarily specific words to his Twitter account just 2 weeks before he died. In September 2011, Welsh wrote, "Dreamt I died in Chicago next weekend. Heart attack in my sleep. Need to write my will today." Then he went back and added, "Correction, the weekend after next." The 40-year-old was found unresponsive in his room at a Chicago hotel 2 weeks later, exactly as he predicted. An official cause of death was never released to the public, but authorities at the time believed it was a combination of prescription narcotics and heroin. As a result, many have speculated that Welsh took his own life, based on his struggles with his mental health and the fact that he had previously admitted to attempting to take his own life via drug overdose in 2001. 6 years later, he told the Salt Rock Plum Review, "I'm unable to replace my demons with anything. It's impossible. I'm only able to hide from them for a few hours a day, more or less." Not everyone believes that Welsh's death was intentional, though. In a statement, Weezer said, "We know damn well he would never have wanted to stop The Rock at today's Riot Fest, the show he was planning on attending. On the contrary, The Rock was what he loved, both in music and art." If you or anyone you know is having suicidal thoughts, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, 1-800-273-8255.